Yes, I think they're kind of just getting ready to come back and join us. In the meantime, May and I are going to kind of put things in motion. But speaking of motion, everybody on your feet, come on, rise up. Okay, we already did Simon Says, but I think we also need a little bit of a stretch, just because maybe you went outside and enjoyed, but let's just kind of do a little bit of a stretch. Come on, get some blood, come on. Okay, you ready? We're going down to touch our toes?
No.
Or knees? How about knees? Knees?
Yeah.
Or wherever? Oh, but don't fall over. Okay.
I'm cheating.
And now you hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. And now, yeah, I know this is silly, but that's okay. Yes, okay. Diane, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing my shoelace.
Oh, I thought
We didn't get back up.
all right, good, good. Have a seat, folks. Thanks for humoring me. That's the kindergarten teacher in me coming out, I guess, on occasion. Anyway, really, okay, yes. I guess if we're going to be over here, maybe we can take that off. But I am delighted to have been asked to participate in this part of the program today, this session. So I'm Debbie Grimes. I'm from First United Church in Shirkston. This is downtown Shirkston. So in case you're saying, where is that?
That's why.
Lake Erie. We're just between Fort Erie and Port Colborne. So we're an hour and a half away this morning, Catherine and I ventured in. My partner in crime this afternoon is?
May Bedford. I'm from Simcoe. And like I said before, I work at Baldwin. That's my full-time job.
Her full-time job.
Yep.
May felt and feels that we should begin with a prayer. So if you don't mind, let's do so. Please, May.
Let us pray. Dear God, be with us as our LLWLs. Be with us this afternoon for our time together, to be present. Be with us in our times of sharing our stories, our thoughts. Be with us all. Amen.
Thanks, May. First off, Michael sort of stole our thunder a little bit, but May and I have reconvened.
Debbie has. She did all the work.
No, that's not true. In true LLWL fashion, where you become flexible and you bounce and you go with it, we're going with it. So we've got a plan of attack. So we don't really have a title for what we're about to do. Perhaps it's best you don't know. Anyway, May and I want to talk with you about being an LLWL, being in the trenches. Now, for everybody here, you've already been in the trenches. You know a little bit about what it's all about, although some are a little bit newer than others. So feel free, May, if you want to sit down, you go right ahead.
Okay.
I don't know, I kind of feel
that's
the
okay.
movement.
You go for it.
So I said to May, maybe we should just do a really quick recap of where we started, how we came to this. For me, it was out in my garden. I love to garden. I'm a farm girl. I live in the country. I grew up in the country. It's my thing. So I was out in the garden, and I'd been kind of tending all of my crops and enjoying quality time, just communing. And that's an important thing to me. In the meantime, I had also been reading a book prior to gardening on women in the Bible. And the book I remember specifically, the chapter was about Adam and Eve and Eve's role. And I'd been mulling that over. And so coincidentally, I am also, or at that point, I was also clerk of session, and so I was trying to deal with covering the minister's absence and the absence of the organist. Well, I got a phone call from the chair of the board who said, I don't have anybody for Sunday. Can you just please do something? And I'm the organist as well. So she said, can you just please do something? I said, Elva, what do you want me to do? She said, well, just play some songs or something. For an hour? I mean, that's fine with me, but what about the congregation? So I thought about that in my garden, pulling weeds and doing what I do in my garden. Thought about that for a bit, and finally on Sunday it rolled around, and I said, Elva, if you don't mind, I have some things I've been thinking about. Could I share them? And that's how it all started. I gave the sermon on Adam and Eve. I brought my apple to church because props are always good. And that's how it all started. And after I did that, I felt drawn and called to participate. And coincidentally, the church had then been receiving things from Hamilton Presbytery about courses, because when I did the courses, you had to go to a church in the area for Saturdays, 1 week after another. I mean, this was back in the face-to-face generation of 25 years ago. And that's how I came to it. But it felt right. And the more I did it, the more it felt right. We're all called and drawn in different ways. And I think it's important that we acknowledge we come to it for different reasons and in different experiences. Maeve, how about you? How did you get here?
My former church, I got started, former minister that we had, we're going back to about, 2005 or so. And I was involved with UCW, involved with the board, and through all that, he had said, you know, there's lay worship courses coming up. At that time when I did it, we went to different churches, and a minister did the course and all that kind of stuff. And I started my classes in 2008. At that time, he said, you know, we can start courses, but you know how you hum and haw about, is it the right way to go, isn't it? And I said to Debbie, I said, you know, I thought about it for a long time, and I kind of had the same experience. I did gardening, worked at the flower bed, and something happened, and I can't explain it, but the Spirit, I was drawn to the Spirit, and I was called. And my husband at that time was starting Alzheimer's, and for me, taking the licensed lay worship leader course, it was a time for me to get away, because I was looking after him, working full-time as well. And it was a time to be away, like I needed that time. And I started and did the classes, had to take some time off, but finished the classes and all that. So 2012 I was licensed. And you need to take time for yourself. You know, my husband had Alzheimer's. It's a difficult thing to handle, and you know, you need to take time for yourself. And I've enjoyed the journey. I love the congregations that I've been to, and it's been an experience that I'll cherish forever. And yeah, so I really enjoy it. So I'm glad this workshop has come about so we can be together, talk about all of our experiences at some time or another, and questions if you have, you know, questions. And we all have struggles. Every day is a struggle. And it's nice to talk to all of you and our experiences together.
And share those experiences.
Yeah.
So Catherine, I didn't forewarn you about this. I'm going to put you on the spot if you don't mind, but you don't mind. On the way up here, Catherine and I were talking about how do you prepare for your church service. So Catherine is on the hot seat twice a month at Shirkston. And so I said to Catherine, how do you do it? And Catherine said,
I read the scripture over, and I mull it over, and mull it over, and mull it over. Then I look at some commentaries, and read them over, and mull it over, and mull it over, and lots of prayer. And then I just sort of sit at the computer, and I like to get the hymns and prayers done. They get done first, because the message is still turning and turning around in my mind, and God is guiding me all the way. So it's a process. And then I have to get it done the week before, like my service is next week.
Yeah.
But I have to have it done yesterday so I can send it to my proofreader,
Yeah.
who can proofread it, send it back to me, then I print it, because we still mail to people who don't have email and who don't come to services. And then I have to put it on a PowerPoint to send it out as an email and turn it into a PDF so that everybody can read it, because there are people who are still not comfortable coming to in-person services.
Yeah.
And then I have to do it on the Sunday next.
Start over again.
well, to actually give the message.
Yes.
For each and every one of us, we all have a process. And I would suspect for many of you, because you were shaking your head in agreement, you recognize it's not something you sit down today and say, I'm going to write the service right now. Anyone else want to share? How do you do it? Anything different that you do?
Can I ask
Please,
one
Scott,
question?
go ahead.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure,
How do you
please.
decide what scriptures you're going to do? Because
Excellent.
some churches follow the lectionary, and other
Yes.
churches say, we don't follow anything, do whatever you want.
Excellent.
Or some of them, you're following a minister who's doing a series, and all of a sudden he's got time off. So now what do you do?
My comment to you would be this. Find out first if it's lectionary or not. And if it's not, I listen to my heart. Because oftentimes, God will give me an idea. And if I'm outside or in the garden or whatever I'm doing, it'll be bang, out of the blue. It'll be, oh, I should talk about that. And that will be the topic that I then flesh out. Oftentimes, I truly believe it's led by God. Because for me to sit down with the whole Bible and say, well, jeepers, what should I do? Or I connect it back to something that I've been reading. Or at one point, a lady came into my classroom when I was teaching and she said, I didn't know this lady, but she came in out of the blue and she said, I bought you this book. A wonderful book, I read it, and it was a church service for the following week.
Wow.
So, I mean, that was a God thing because I wasn't looking for the book, I didn't know the lady, I didn't ask for it, and here it was. Wonderful, wonderful learning opportunity. So I'd say, for me, it's listen to what's happening, pay attention to what's around you, and that tells you which way to go. Anybody else want to comment, please?
Mine is very similar. I start with if the scripture is there, and kind of unpack it that way. If I'm not following lectionary, or I haven't been told what I'm preaching on, because sometimes even that happens too, right? Like if there's a sermon series or like this is what you're preaching on, and I'm like, oh, good. Sometimes, sometimes not. But, I have a whiteboard on my wall in my office, and it usually has 3 circles, and those are like my thought bubbles, and then I start developing themes or thoughts around what I think I'm going to talk about, and then things kind of offshoot off of that, and it ends up being a bit of a pinwheel, and then most of the time things get erased, put back on, crossed out. No, I don't want to go that way. I want to go this way, and that's purely from a sermon writing perspective. I also write my prayers, pick my hymns, do all that ahead of time, mostly because the secretary needs them. I tend to be a Friday night writer, but I think that's just because I work 2 other jobs and that's when it happens, right? But I tend to do a lot of prep beforehand, and then just sort of hopefully get it out on paper before Saturday night.
If it's here, one way or the other, it comes out.
Yeah.
Any other comments, please? I see a lot of people shaking heads.
I just completed a 7-week study, sermon series study of the Lord's Prayer. And it was easy for that because that is that 7 weeks, what's going to happen in 7 weeks. I'm not this is a confession, I'm not a lectionary person. The lectionary for me only in those high seasons like Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Easter, but beyond that, the general time, it's really just taking what's happening in the society, what's happening in the world, and giving reflection on those. So between now and Advent, it's really going back again to grappling with what's happening. In fact, tomorrow, and what we normally do, is have plans for quarter plans. So it's a quarterly plan for whatever is going to happen. So it's not really just the week before or the month before, but usually there's a quarter by quarter plan that is well in advance of what is going to happen. I think that makes it a lot easier because you have a plan working with.
A big plan,
A
that's
big
right.
plan working with, which makes it easier for the reflection process. as well. So that helps.
For sure, and being a minister in that church, you have that luxury, and that's great. And then for somebody going in,
Yeah.
if they could know a little bit about what that plan is, that might help a lot too. So this becomes the part of knowing who to ask or who to speak to when you're planning what you're going to speak on. Please, Kathy.
One of the, I wish I could remember the title of the book, I can't. It was quite helpful. But one of the things that I really enjoy, whatever the scripture text is, that gets selected to be the text for the week, is to look at sort of the rhetorical function of the text. You know, why did this piece of the message get written the way that it did? You know, there's certain things that can be said in a letter, like Paul might have written, that can't be said any other way. You know, it's said to a group, or it's said from a distance, or it's... so what part does the form of the text play in the delivery of the message? The Psalms. You can say things with poetry that you can't say any other way, or with a song, or with a parable. You know, sometimes you just need to have that right image or that right metaphor to kind of get something really deep across. So what I always like to play with, what does the form of the text have, what part does that have to play in the actual message of the text? And sometimes that informs the coat hanger, the framework for the response that is the message. If it's a letter, like an epistle, well, maybe the form of the sermon is to write back, you know, to question what you've heard, or to say what you really think about it. Or if it's poetry, well, maybe that poetry invokes an image in your mind, and you play with the image, and that becomes it's really quite playful and quite wonderful, all of the different kinds of texts that Scripture throws at us.
You just gave me two great ideas that feel free to steal, but the first one is when you talked about the intent or the way it's written. Imagine Jesus bending down and writing in the sand when the woman is being brought in from the adulterous relationship. I mean, can you imagine doing that with children in a children's story, or having that little box of sand and Jesus doing that, or someone acting that role? Just so interesting. Or the next sermon in letter form. Dear Paul, why did you and how come, and explain this. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Well, that you can only read what Jesus has written by looking down on it. And the posture our bodies take when we're looking down
It's true.
is what part does that then play in the attitude in which you bring to the sermon, or how people hear it?
So much creativity. May, did you want to add anything to that, or should we move on to number 2?
Oh, we can move on. I just say I don't use the lectionary. When I'm at different churches, 3 different churches in a month, I don't follow the lectionary. I've got binders full of messages, so I kind of, I've been knowing my congregations I'm going to, so I don't know how to explain it, but I kind of look at the lectionary, see what it might be, but it's not necessarily what I use or anything. I just kind of find something, in already my messages I put together already, and find something that just might touch that congregation in the message.
When I read this question, I took something differently from it, but the question is, how do you prepare yourself mentally when visiting a conversation or a congregation for the first time? Okay, so you've gotten out of your car, you shut the door, you've got your notebook, you're ready to go in and give your message. What are you bringing to this? What are you thinking? How are you preparing yourself to walk through those doors? Well, I can tell you one time it got me in big trouble. I sat down on a bench outside of the church, sitting there relaxing, kind of thinking about my message, sitting there. I was very early, thank goodness. Sitting there, preparing, praying, reading, thinking. When I got up and went into the church, the minister greeted me at the door and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, I think I'm here because you're not. And she said, you're at the wrong church, dear. So
Oh, really? Oh.
you never know. Expect the unexpected. How do you prepare yourself to walk through those doors? What's going on in your head? Go ahead, please jump in. Let's hear from you.
I just pray.
Are you sitting in the car praying? Are you walking in the door
I
praying?
pray before I leave the driveway. I pray on the way to church.
Yes.
I sing wild music sometimes and gospel music.
Do you? So you're singing on the way? Good
Yeah,
for you.
singing on the way, and then when I get there, again, I before I, like you said, is sitting on a bench usually where the pulpit is or whatever, and then I'll say a prayer and say, be with me and
Well
ground me
grounded.
through.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Somebody else? Do you have his favorite way? Please, Harold, jump in.
I have always tried, when I'm invited to the church for the first time, I try to go to that church a week or 2 weeks beforehand, so I can see them and see what they do and how they do it. And I will get to know a few of the people, usually the board or something will be there. Like, oh, yeah, so I'm not cold when I actually go in. It's like, oh yeah, hi, remember me? I was here 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So you were a spy first, but that's good.
You gotta check it out and see what they're like and what they have.
That's a really good point, too.
I showed up once at a church that I had never been to, and I couldn't get there the week before, and they had no sound system whatsoever, no microphones or anything.
Oh.
I'm a soft-spoken person, not that one. So I
Okay.
have to project out, but it's like, wow, nothing?
We assume, we assume churches have these things, but they don't, or they're not working.
Well, luckily that church, because they're used to it, most of them sat near the front, which is very, very rare.
Very rare. Very rare. Anyone else want to offer something? Or May, did you want to comment on that?
I usually just go in the church and sit in the front pew and sit there I'm usually there early enough, just go in the front pew and just pray and, quiet time.
Be centered.
Yeah, be centered, yeah.
That's really, really important. Then you said we had 2 hours, is that right?
Yeah, what's the time, Kate? How we doing?
You're doing just wonderful. Carry on.
Carry
Okay,
on, all
all
right.
right.
2 hours, all right.
I didn't say 2 hours. I'll give you the 5-minute one.
Okay,
good. Sorry, May and I were just going to open this up to you and say, did you have any meaningful experiences thus far, or times when you left after a service and something just came with you, it made you feel a certain way, or conversely, have you had a disaster experience? Everybody's kind of laughing and chuckling. I can share, I've had them, a lot of them. One of the hardest service I ever preached was, and Catherine, I think this was before you arrived, I got a phone call at 2:30 in the morning, and it was the Saturday before Easter Sunday morning. 2:30 in the morning, the phone rang. And the request was, the minister just had a heart attack, you're it. I said, oh, Dad. It was my dad. Oh, Dad, really? And that was the night I didn't get any sleep, but I was able to pull together something. But then to go into the church the next morning being exhausted and stepping into the footsteps of the minister who had a heart attack and was, kind of tender at the time in terms of whether or not he was able to pull through. So when Michael spoke today about knowing what's going on behind the scenes, thank goodness it was my home church, and so I was okay with that, with knowing the congregation, but you don't know what you're stepping into, and it's really, really tough. What would you like to share?
How about the times you go in and you look out in the congregation and there's 6 retired ministers sitting in front of you? I exaggerate, there were 3, and I was just panicking, like, what am I going to say that's going to have any impact or any meaning for these knowledgeable and, these experts?
And how did it go, Sandy?
It went well because I was getting complimented.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah.
And you just hid behind the podium so no
That's
one saw
right.
your knees
Saw
shaking.
my knees shaking, exactly.
But that's hard to do when the podium's made of clear glass.
Oh,
Yes.
Because I've had that.
Clear glass?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Way to go. You did it in front of 3 other ministers.
I had a choice. I had to do it, right?
Yes, you did, but you rose to the occasion with God's help. So way to go.
Absolutely.
If you can do that, you got this.
They probably loved it too, to hear a different
Yes,
perspective
that's right.
on
That's
what
right.
they have preached for years.
Thank you. Anybody?
I had a very unique experience where the minister that, well, Sharon, she died. She had a thing with her throat, was it cancer or something? And she called me the morning of Sunday morning and asked me if I could deliver her service.
She had written
Oh.
it.
Because she had written it and she couldn't, her voice was gone. And I said, sure. Like, but where is it? Like, and her husband had to come and deliver it to my house that morning because she was going into the hospital. And so I went and I delivered it. It was two different charges. I'd never been here before. So I was quite, but I couldn't say no, and I couldn't, it was what I was supposed to do, and I just felt that God was with me, and I just did my best, and I tried to, like when I was saying the words, I tried to think of her, because I knew her, and I knew how she spoke, and how kind she was, and everything, so I tried to enunciate and say it like she would have said it, and so people were. And when I had to explain, of course, to the people where she was and that she was on her way to the hospital, of course, everyone was upset, but everyone was glad that I came and delivered it for her.
For sure. Thank you, Becky. Becky shared, for those who had trouble hearing, she shared that her minister had cancer and had written the church service that morning but was not able to deliver it. And Becky stepped in that day and gave it twice. And how tough it was. But what an honor for you to be asked to deliver that message. That's pretty special. That's awesome. Anybody else want to share something?
And it's time,
Go ahead.
it's times like that that were needed. I had one experience, it was a Friday, and the minister, one of their family members was actually killed, and they had to go. And so they called me to do Sunday service because they were gone, and they needed, and I filled in for 2 or 3 weeks. But it's those times when we're needed, right? I mean, when accidents and life crises come on us, we have to be ready, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's where keeping all your services you've done in the
Yep,
past
yep.
comes in really handy.
Yep.
Because Saturday night, the
Yep.
minister had a stroke. Can you do the service
Yep.
tomorrow? Look at the scripture reading that was on the lectionary. I did it already
Yes.
once. Grabbed it and I was good to
That's
go.
what I do, Kathy.
Thank goodness.
Mine's in 3 binders, yeah.
Thank
That's,
goodness.
yeah.
Keith, you shared something easy earlier. We're going to put you on the spot for a moment about a medical emergency happening during your church service that you were sharing.
Yeah, it was such a powerful message that I was delivering that a person passed out right at the very front. She was a senior,
Oh.
and she had heart issues, and so the service came to a grinding halt at that point. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. We must all be delivering, and everybody's nodding, so powerful messengers out there. Anyways, the ambulance came and the service came to an abrupt halt. I said, we need to take a break here. Obviously, we need to provide some space for this person to allow the medical people to come in and do their thing. She came around near the end, but she needed to go to the hospital. She gave the royal wave as she was leaving on the gurney. And so as a layperson, I was asked I could have a worship service. I was leading that. The minister wasn't there. And basically, it was I sort of really did a condensed Cole's Note version of the sermon at that point, because people were now meeting in the fellowship room. We put the chairs around and we sort of, in prayer, and we prayed for the person that had left. So talking about unexpected, you were just in the midst of in mid-sentence, and it just happened, and then everything came grinding halt. So I don't know if anybody else has experienced that scenario or not, but it does shake you for sure, but you carry on. You have the faith to carry on.
Yeah, I think expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any idea what's coming. Kath, please.
Well, Keith's words reminded me of an incident that happened a couple of years ago. The woman who had offered to read the scripture lesson that day was just coming down, had just finished reading the text, and was coming down the steps from we have a stage, I guess, that runs across the front of the sanctuary. And it has 3 stairs on it, and when you look at it in a certain way, you can't see them because the wood all blends in with the wood beneath it. Anyway, missed her step, went right down, and had obviously hurt her knee in the fall. And so the challenge is to do it in a way that doesn't draw more attention to her, because she would have been mortified, and we all. But anyway, people were very concerned, and so taking a moment right there in the service to just stop everything, to allow her the time she needed to get scooped up and carried, helped back to her chair, and then to say, is it all right if we just take a minute and pray for you, because we're worried about you. And so that's what we did, and we sort of stepped aside, but then we stepped right back in and kept going. It was not as serious as some of the stories that have been shared, but I think just points out, as Keith's story did, the importance of attending to the moment, as the Spirit is there, and people saying afterwards, how nice it was that we didn't just steamroll right by it and carry on with everything like nothing had happened. So
it's so important to have that flexibility and to just recognize what's going on and to pay attention to that. That's really important.
Sorry, I don't want to belabor. We have the similar themes coming. I was called to provide supply for a church that I had been to several times before, small little country church that might only hold like 25 people if it was completely full, so very close knit congregation, lots of if not family friends, and the chair of the board and the person we all know that the go-to person in the congregation, right? The person who does the work. Dropped dead on Friday, massive heart attack, and there were some people that were just finding out about it on Sunday morning as we were walking into church. And I would be one of those people coming in to supply that I, just finding out. And I look at my sermon and I'm talking about joy. And I can't preach this, or I can't. Thankfully, I was there early, and I said, okay, we're gonna start 10 minutes late, because you all need to come together. I'm gonna go sit over here for a little bit, and I'll be back. And I have no idea how, well, I mean, I do know how, but something came and it got written down, or it, got spoken either way, and there was a sermon that had nothing to do with what I had written or what I had brought, but that's what we did. And we did a lot of prayer, and we did there was some silence and some reflection, and so, I mean, that didn't come from me at all that day, but yeah, you kind of have to, as you say, expect the unexpected, be able to roll with things, and to maybe know that sometimes what you have there to know when it's not gonna work, and then to kind of try to come up with, would it have been great if I had the phone call on Saturday morning to know? Sure, it would have been, but that didn't happen, so, yeah.
Right, you gave the congregation exactly what they needed, time and honoring of the individual who passed. And again, it's listening to what's going on in the congregation as you're going through the service even. We better go on to number 4. Challenges that you face as a licensed lay worship leader. I don't just necessarily mean in church or writing messages, services. What challenges do you face? You all face them every week. So now you've shaken your heads that yes, you face them. But what are those challenges? May, why don't you?
Challenges, for me, a challenge, when I look at, I work 5 days a week, you have Saturday, Sunday off, you're preparing a message, you're getting the church service ready, if you have to do it on Sunday. You have to take time for yourself. I know it's easy for me to say, because when a church calls me, I say, no, I'm not available. But you have to take time for yourself. Look at what you need as yourself, and let the Spirit take care of you. And really, like I say, take care of yourself. Now, I know I said to Becky on the way, I said, I would have liked to slept in this morning. It was my 2 days off this weekend. But I got up and I came because I'm glad I did. So this is my time to share, you know, and we have to take time for ourselves, our challenges in life. It happens, we're challenged every day. Doesn't matter what we're doing. We have a challenge to take care of us and our families in that. So it's important that you take time for yourself.
And you mentioned your family. I mean, it's great to have the opportunity to be an LLWL. It is. It's an honor. It's a privilege. It's a blessing. But we also have family and friends and animals. I love that you have your animals. You have your property, you know, the things around your home. The eaves troughs need to be cleaned again. And all those things in our lives that pile up that we have to deal with on top of everything else. And be in church on Sunday morning. Don't forget to change the clocks back an hour tonight, because tomorrow morning you're giving your service. You know, as LLWLs, our life is sometimes not as well planned. And you know, I think it's wonderful that ministers have their steady congregations and they're able to be there on Sundays. But we're the kind of the drop-ins, and that makes it extra challenging for us too, on top of everything else going on in our lives. So as May has said now a couple times, take time for yourself, and don't forget you can say no when you need to. It's okay to say no, because you can't give your best when you are already drained on the inside. You cannot give water from an empty jug. I love that because it's true. It's true.
Can I piggyback on that? You
Please
also
do.
have to be good to yourself, be kind to yourself. Here's a scenario. My husband's aunt passed away, and my husband's cousins called me to ask me if I'd officiate at the service. I saw the word funeral up there. And I had done a couple before. And I said, okay, can I get back to you? And I called them back about an hour later, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I cannot do it. And I beat myself up about that. I felt so guilty for saying no. And I said, oh, I need some kind of sign. So I jumped in my car and I went to a farm market, and I turned around, and there was a man I worship the ground he walks on, Ted Smith. There he was, and I said to Ted, like, can I talk to you? And he said, yeah, what's up? And I told him what's going on. I said, Sandy, you have to remember, you have to take time for yourself, and don't worry about it. And that was all I needed to hear, and I can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
Like, you have to first love yourself, right?
It's true, and saying no
Yeah,
for the
is
right
okay.
reason is so important.
There we go.
You're right, Sandy. How effective would you have been at the front of the funeral
That's right.
as soon as it started and you burst into tears?
Mhm.
It's not going to help.
That's
So, no, honoring your needs too is top-notch, really important. Any other comment? I don't want to belabor things for you too much.
Sometimes our needs are something like this. Because there was a while ago, a workshop I signed up for, LLWL at 5 Oaks. And it was a Saturday morning, and I had been working full-time, and I did not want to go. I had my laundry to do all the way, that long drive, all the way to 5 Oaks. I had to do this at home and this at home, and I left it, and I grumped the whole way there. Oh my gosh. It was wonderful. We got to walk the labyrinth. I did it in my bare feet. It was October, and it was a nice enough day that I was in my bare feet for the labyrinth. I praised God all the way home. That is just exactly what I needed.
Yeah, I remember that day. I couldn't go. I was supposed to, October 21st. I remember that. Yeah.
It was wonderful, and I was so glad I did go. I was not begrudging it at all. No grumps from me.
God leads us where we need to be if
Yep.
we listen. Sarah, go ahead.
Sorry, the question was about like challenges and things that you were facing. So I'm a very active member of my congregation. I've been chair of the board and chair of worship and, you know, all of those things. And sometimes I struggle when there's stuff going on in the church, because there's always stuff, right? And making sure that I keep that hat and my licensed lay worship leader hat like on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like it's really difficult, but I think it's I've had to tell myself that it's so important that the chair of council doesn't go into the pulpit and preach. Like that can't happen. Even though you do wear both of those hats. Thankfully I don't anymore. But that's something I've struggled with. Yeah.
When it's heavy on your heart and mind, it can meander in if you're not careful. And I see that I skipped it. What? That's the fastest 2 hours. All right, I guess we better go that way then.
We'll go this way, yeah.
Switching gears.
I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, what we're hoping for is that you will take, was that a 5-minute warning?
Yeah.
Okay, so
5-minute
would you
warning,
take
okay.
3 minutes, and obviously we have to time this, and please, at your table, try and come up with some ideas, if you have any, for future topics that you would like for workshops. Either something like this, or via Zoom, or any other format. Is there something that is kind of niggling in the back of your mind that you think, wow, that would be really helpful to have? And then, can you flip, if you don't mind, May, please? The second thing, you were all interviewed by a member of our team or by members of the team. The question came about, sometimes the questions that we ask you don't really give you an opportunity to showcase or share who you are and what's really important to you. Are there questions, or is there a question that you wish we would have asked that should be included on future relicensing? Because yes, it's going to happen again. You'll all meet with the team at one point again. Is there a question? So those are the 2 things. You have 3 minutes. Go.
Unless they just want to tell us, I mean, yeah. What's that?
He said, I'm standing in front of the window.
Oh, she's getting glary? Is she getting glary? Uh-oh. She's getting a glare.
Yeah, I did read our manual where it says, you gotta do 15 minutes first.
Thanks again. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Very helpful.
You know,
I still have all my stuff. Everything we had to do.
It feels so weird, right? Yeah, it's gonna be kind of weird.
Churches know that we can't do it. I've got more churches.
Okay, are we,
Okay, time's up.
okay, here we go. We're gonna wrap it up.
Yes, that was the fastest 3 minutes in your life, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, future workshop, anybody wanna?
Please,
Yep, Sandy.
As Kathy was mentioning about how she puts together a sermon, I would love to hear a minister look at a scripture and then unpack it in front of me and see the thought process that's involved with that.
That's really cool.
What was that now? So the minister?
Minister
Minister sermons.
preparation.
Preparation.
Yeah,
Minister's sermon preparation.
yeah,
That'd be fascinating.
it would.
Just to hear them talk it through.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody's different, so.
Okay.
Yeah, but it would be
Minister's
good to
sermon
have
prep. Okay.
ideas. Other ideas.
Other ideas, guys?
Sorry, and it might also be interesting to hear, like maybe two different ministers on the same
Oh,
scripture.
that's cool.
Two different ministers on the same scripture?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously making sure that they're sure. Yeah.
By the way, you will be completing, we're hoping that you will complete a feedback form in the end. And if you come up with something else that you either don't want to share right now or you want to jot down, it would be
Yeah.
much appreciated. Just insights in how we can make these seminars more meaningful to you, to us, because May and I are with
Okay,
you.
something else? Okay. Interview questions you might want to have included in your interview. Is there any questions that kind of, no?
Might be helpful to even have had the interview questions here, but I didn't think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Please.
Sue?
this was my first interview.
Yeah?
No one asked me if I had ever actually gone out and led a worship service anywhere.
Okay.
Now, I could have offered that information up.
Sure, but we could have offered all of this information up, but
Yeah.
wouldn't it be important to draw this from people, or to have them share this? I wonder about, there's nothing specifically saying about time reading the Bible or favorite, is there something in our list about favorite Bible stories or verses and how they relate to your life? That one's in there? Because that's a really good one.
What was that now, sorry?
As mine, my comment, favorite Bible verses or Bible stories.
Favorite.
But that may already be there. Anything else that immediately comes to mind before we get
But no,
pulled
that's okay,
pulled off the stage, so to say?
What if we could add to the application your comment, have you ever led worship service somewhere else? Just put it on the application.
Yeah, that's a good plan. Have you ever led worship service somewhere else? And Kathy, please.
Yeah, speaking for the team and the folks that did the interviews, we realized that the interviews that you've all had were for our part very much get to know you kinds of questions, because truthfully, we are all new to doing this work of doing research, so we're learning too. And as time goes by, we'll get to know you better, and we look forward to that. But we want those questions to not so much necessarily at the interview time itself, but to be something that helps you to go deeper within what God is saying to you, even as you just reflect on those questions in preparation for interviews. So it would be helpful for us to know what you might have wished we asked you.
There's so many other things that we would like to have chatted about, things with you this afternoon. Mentors, for example, and the importance of mentors.
We didn't have enough time,
No,
did we?
we just didn't have enough time.
We don't have
However,
enough time.
there are lots of things that could be discussed at another point. So I guess maybe we better
That's it.
say goodbye.
So maybe part of this workshop suggestions for next time could be something about self-care.
Self-care, there you go, that's a good plan.
It's something that we just take for granted and we sometimes overlook. But I think an important part of the ongoing development, emotional development is self-care.
What about something on mentors?
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah,
What about something on music, using music in service?
there you go. Music.
Michael Brooks does excellent on that music stuff.
Excellent.
Was there a question about our future in the interview? Like, so where we see ourselves in 5 years?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so,
There
no.
was a question about where do you see the future of the United Church?
Oh, that's what it
Yes.
was,
But
yes.
in terms of our specific role, that's a really good comment too. Okay,
Future.
Where are you in, where do you see yourself as an LLWL in 5 years or as a
Well,
person?
or what, yeah.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Good comments. Thank you folks for sharing. Okay.
Thank you.
Crowley time. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I do, yeah, I'll bring it over.
So the final segment of today is facing technology.
Sorry, Keith.
And I'm going to call John. John, do you want me to steer the back there? while you're-
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Don't stand in front of the window, John.
Yeah, no, wait till later. You are.
We're a little late, but this is both too short a time and too long a time. It's too long for a basic introduction and way too short to get into any depth. So I'll try and hit the high notes. Just a quick intro. A few of you know me, but not all. So I've been live streaming worship services from United Churches for about 8 years, long before it became an actual necessity. It started out from a grant from NIagara Presbytery. The proposal came out of the church planting work group that I was a part of. So we bought the equipment. At the beginning, it was a roving live stream. I went through it. There were a dozen churches that I was rotating through. In the course of doing that, of course, of necessity, I learned how to connect to a lot of different church infrastructure. Learned how to stream a lot of different styles of church services, and just got kind of a general broad overview. So because I've been roaming around a little bit, there were quite a few people, at least in the Niagara region, that had some idea who I was and what my background was. So when the pandemic started, I was getting so many calls and emails from people wanting help to get online, obviously. And it got to the point where I couldn't actually handle the number of calls. So I created a Facebook help forum. A couple of you might be members. Walter Reed is one of them. He's actually an active member of my group. It's called Canadian Churches That Live Stream. I created that as a help forum. I'm pleased to see a couple of people writing that down. It's a closed group for a couple of reasons. Number one, I didn't want the members getting spammed by Nigerian princes or anything else. So I kept it as a closed group. So if you want to join and access the resources of that group, you need to apply. I screen everybody. I'm assuming you're all legit, so I would probably let you in. But the membership is screened. It is exclusively Canadian. I do not accept anybody from outside of Canada. Because let's face it, we have very few mega churches up here. When I was reading online help forums before that, there were people saying, you know, we have $40,000 for our next camera. Which one should we buy? None of our churches can afford $40,000 for the whole system, never mind for one camera. So clearly, their situation was not ours. So I created an exclusively Canadian group. So that's kind of how I came to be here, actually, was I think it was largely Walter, actually, that kind of brought my name out. So, so with all of that background, if this presentation really sucks, I'm sorry. It really shouldn't. It's a little bit intimidating starting a talk when the very first thing that they did was give everybody a bag with a rock in it. It seems a little unkind, but anyway. So, what I'm going to tell you is not tech related. I'm trying to focus it on worship leadership, obviously. Having said that, I am not one of you. I'm not an LLWL. I preach once a year. The only time I preach is when I come back from a Habitat trip. I will preach once on lessons learned because I can't write. I'm not a sermon writer. I'm a storyteller, so that gives me stories to tell. So I have been in front of a congregation, but I'm not one of you. So what I'm going to tell you is not necessarily the best things from a ministry perspective. They are the best things from the perspective of being behind the camera and putting this out there. But I think some of this may be somewhat helpful for you. First thing I'm going to mention, there's something that's become a mantra in the group, and it's sound. You might think on the face of it that the video quality is the most important thing. It is not. Video, people will watch a live stream if the video is less than perfect. If the sound is less than perfect, they will tune out very quickly, as long as they can hear it clearly. So one of the things that all of you need to bear really firmly in mind is that you need to, if you're in a church, I mean, all of this is if you're in a church that is actually recording or streaming the service, you need to be mic'd. Can't tell you how many ministers I have met with big booming voices who project well and say, I don't need to be amplified, I don't need a mic. Well, if you don't have a mic, you're not coming through on the recorder. I don't care how big your voice is, we won't pick you up. So you need to be mic'd, and if you're one of those ministers, or Keith, who walks around when they're trying to be filmed, you need to make sure that your miking is portable as well, a lapel, headset, whatever. But if you're going to roam around, you need to bear that in mind, okay? It's important for sound. It's also important if you are that type of minister, make sure that the tech team where you're preaching is aware of the fact that you will roam around. Make sure that they're actually up to the task of following you around. In this particular case, it wasn't a problem. It wasn't a big deal. I just wanted to pick on him a little bit. There was a time that I actually threatened one of my ministers I was going to nail his shoe to the floor because he roamed around that much, and he actually roamed to places where the camera wouldn't reach. You need to think about that. Just something to be aware of. So, if the audio and video are decent, you know that the stream is going out there. Obviously, content is the next thing. And if you're not cognizant of the fact that you're being filmed or streamed, you might not be engaging the online audience the way you think you are. When you're preaching, I assume all of you look out into the congregation. You're making eye contact with people. You're actually engaging with the audience. Well, the people at home don't get that unless you look directly into the camera. And when you're looking directly into the camera, you are talking to the people at home. You need to make a conscious effort to be doing that, to actually let the people at home know that they're part of the congregation that you're speaking to. Without that, it's a less effective presentation. So just something to be aware of. The other side of that as well is when you're prepping for the service, remember to include the people at home in your welcome at the beginning of the service. Remember to include them in the pastoral prayers. That's rather hugely important. Next point is actually something that I didn't prepare well for tonight. So anybody that's watching this later will probably point out my hypocrisy here. But if you are in a church, or if you're one of those preachers who uses sermon illustrations, slides, or videos like reinforcement during the sermon, make sure that that is going to be captured in the recording or the live stream. Because if it's important enough that you want that illustration to be seen by the people in the pews, obviously, it's important enough that the people at home need to be able to see it as well. And ideally, it should be fed directly into the streaming system. That this is not your responsibility, but it is something that you might want to take home to your own churches. The camera does not pick up the screen well. So just aiming the camera at a projection screen does not capture that well. And if it's an important image that you want to put up there, you really need to be able to put that out in decent quality. So there are ways to do that, to feed it directly into your live stream as a picture-in-picture or the main image. Just something to be aware of. If it's important enough for the people in the pews, it has to go out for the people at home as well. Same note, if you're one of those ministers that uses a lot of that stuff, if you're not used to being recorded or streamed, be aware of the fact that you should not be using copyrighted images. Be careful of what you're using. Most of us have licensing in place for songs and for music. Almost none of us have licensing in place for images. And particularly, none of us have licensing in place for commercial video. You might be tempted to put up a piece of Iron Man for some illustration. Don't do that. That will shut you down. If you put that out online, that is a very clear infringement. So just be cognizant of that stuff. If you're putting up illustrations and you're not used to the fact that it's going to go out to the world, you need to pay attention to that and make sure you're not using copyrighted images. There's another subtlety that it's not always possible, but it is something to be aware of. When you're speaking to an online audience, particularly if you're only speaking to the online audience and there's nobody in the pews yet, but regardless of that, if it's going out to the world, try and avoid content that makes reference to things that online viewers can't see. Don't refer to things that are happening in the sanctuary off screen, because that excludes the people that are watching it from home. So just something to think about. It's a little content thing that if you're excluding part of your flock, they're not going to stay engaged. So there's a lot of this stuff that's sort of planning sort of stuff that I'm going to hit very, very quickly. But the next thing of that is dead space in your service. If you're there live in the sanctuary and there's things like collection being taken up, collection can take 5 minutes. Do you have any idea how boring that is online when there's nothing happening? And right now in the pandemic, it's much shorter because everybody throws the collection into the plate at the back of the church. It comes up much quicker. In normal times, that 5 minutes is really dead space. You might think about, well, probably there's music playing, so that's nice. But you might think about putting up a couple of slides with some information during that time as well. One of those things could be how to make online donations, because that needs to go up at some point anyway. Put it then so people have something to read while there's nothing else happening on screen. Just a thought. Just one of those things to be aware of that can minimize the impact of the dead time. The other one, and this is a touchy subject, but one of the really boring things to watch online is communion. I'm not going to suggest that we don't do communion, but if you can think of ways to keep it moving, that's better. Communion is depending on the church. I mean, I built a streaming system for a Lutheran church. Lutherans are very sensitive about being filmed during communion because that's a very private act. So they wanted some background images to go up. They weren't going to film that at all. But for those of us that are actually filming the service, be aware of the fact that people probably don't want to be highlighted on screen, but also while that's happening in the sanctuary, not happening at home. Two ways around that. I've seen it done both ways. For us, when we were not able to go to the in the sanctuary at all, our ministers were actually delivering those little takeout communion elements, so everybody could actually participate at home. If you're going to a wider audience, early in the service, you might say, we're going to be doing communion. If you want to go and get bread, juice, or wine, and be prepared, you can take communion with us and make it so that they are actually part of that. I mean, the first one only works if you actually know everybody that's going to be watching, that you can deliver the elements to, but the other might be worth thinking about, but it's a way to include people. When you're planning your sermon, I have had ministers in the past who were quite humorous, actually, but would tell the odd story that was people might consider to be somewhat off color. And if that's your temptation in normal times when you're preaching to a small congregation and that's your flaw, that's cool. It's fun to listen to. But if you're sending that out to the world, and it's going to be recorded and available forevermore to a wider audience, you might want to think about whether you actually wanted to include that particular story or not. Just it's a content thing that think about the fact that it's not just your people that are watching. It could conceivably be anybody in the world. I touched on this a little bit before, but there are less visual distractions at home. Say this carefully because you guys are all preachers, but when you're preaching, the people in the pews, they can look at the stained glass windows. They can look at you. They can look at the stained glass windows. They can look at the flowers. They can look around the sanctuary. They can see their friends. When they're sitting at home looking at the screen, all they've got to engage them is you, what you're doing and what you're saying. So just be aware of that fact, that for people watching from home, there is less other stuff to keep them engaged. So just something to think about, particularly seeing as most of the people that are going to be watching it at home are watching it on their phone or on a tablet. Relatively few watch it on a full-size computer screen. So that little image, if you're not keeping things moving and crisp, it's not particularly engaging. So just something to be aware of. So rehearsals. This is a challenge for some of you that remind me particularly when you're talking about guest ministry. This is almost impossible to do, but you need to do it to the extent you can. Particularly if the church is new to streaming, if you're at your own church and changes are made to the process, whatever, you need to practice. Practice, practice, practice. Do some test runs. Almost all of the streaming sites will allow you to do a private recording that doesn't go out to the world, but that you can watch later to see whether it's good or not. So do practice runs. Don't just rehearse your sermon. Practice it the way you're going to actually present it in the church, on camera, with the sound system. Like, do that practice. And not only you practice, when you prepare the order of service, that needs to go out to the team. You guys hit on some of this before, but the order of service needs to be clearly laid out for the team that's going to be putting out the live stream. If they don't know what's going to happen, then they can only react. They can't anticipate and make it smooth and make it actually pleasing to watch. Consistency is good, but if your service is consistently bad, that's not a good thing. And there are services that you watch online where clearly nobody's watching to QA their own performance because they suck, and they suck every week. So it's one of those things. There's no way of getting better at it without rehearsing and practicing and making sure that what you're doing is what's actually going to come through the way you intended online. So okay, I mentioned this briefly, but the planning part and getting the order of service out there. If you're going into a church it was mentioned, ask the questions, ask what they've got, who's doing what, but ask also, what technology are you using? What am I going to be in front of? And what do I need to be aware of that you're doing? If you go into a church that's going to live stream the service unaware of that fact, I can't think that that would be a whole lot of fun to suddenly find out that you're going to be not preaching to the congregation, you're going to be conceivably preaching to the world. Worth adding that to your list of questions, just to make sure. And if you are actually going into a church where they actually stream things out, make sure they've got the information as early as you can get it to. Your sermon may not be written, but if your order of services together, get that out to the team early. It is, trust me, it is extremely, extremely helpful to the team. There's another a point that, again, this isn't necessarily just you guys, but you are a part of this, particularly at your own churches. The whole worship team, not just the worship leaders, the whole worship team needs to be comfortable with the idea of being streamed or recorded and going out to the world. I can't tell you how many churches I've been in touch with that asked for a proposal and how do we do this, put together a whole proposal, and then you find out that this is what the minister wanted to do, but it doesn't have broader buy-in from the board, from the organist, from the choir. The whole worship team needs to be on board with this, and if they're not, it's not going to carry conviction. Simple as that. The whole worship team needs to be aware of what's going on, be part of the planning, because there's nothing worse than finding out once everything's a done deal that you haven't been a part of the discussions, but you're going to be a part of what's actually streamed out to the world. So this is something that to be aware of, not necessarily in your current role, but as a member of your own worship team back at the church. As part of that whole planning process, making sure everybody's on board, one of the groups that really needs to be a part of that, and I didn't even have this noted until Jen spoke earlier, children's ministry can be really sensitive if you're recording or streaming, and if you're parachuting into a church for a Sunday and you call the kids forward and they don't want their kids to be on camera, that can be a really bad thing. And one of my churches is very sensitive to that because they have children in foster care that they don't want to be showing on screen. There are security and safety issues that are a reason why they don't want those kids shown. So the cameras in that church were actually made specifically much higher than would be comfortable, so that they're looking down and not actually seeing any of the congregation. And they don't call the children forward, so the children are never in sight. That's not always the case, but it is always the case that you will have children doing things that you really don't want to be filmed. Years and years ago, one of my churches where there's a long, narrow center aisle that looks down at the front of the chancel steps, and that's where the kids all gathered for the kids' time. I had my main camera aimed down there, and I had two side cameras that were robotic that looked at the sides. The main camera, had I used that one at that particular time, one of the little girls, so 3 or 4-year-old girl, decided that was the perfect time to lift her skirt up. While the side cameras were fine. But that front camera, if that was all I had and that was the line of sight, that's not what you want to put out on the internet. So kids are a challenge. And as I mentioned before about making sure that your ministers are mic'd clearly, well, when somebody goes down to talk to the kids, if you're not cognizant of the fact that you need some way of getting the voice into the recording or the live stream, that's going to be dead space in the service. So, as was mentioned, somebody talking into the leader talking into the mic, asking the kids the questions and then repeating the questions, that's fine. That actually works perfectly, not picking up the kids directly. But you need to be aware, if you're going to sit down and talk to the kids, make sure that you're not just talking to the kids, because that won't actually go onto the stream, it'll be dead space. If that's what you want, fine. But if you actually intend that to be part of the service, there has to be a way to pick it up, okay? So, just a fundamental principle, anything that you want to go on the stream has to be mic'd. You don't pick up anything otherwise. If your church is, or this might be a future thing, hopefully not, but if we return to a point where we're not back in the pews again, and the only thing that's going out is a live stream. Preaching can be a whole different thing, and there's been a lot of discussion about this with a couple of the ministers in my group. If you're just recording a pre-recording a service with nobody in the pews, the dining room table type service is really effective, because if you're sending it out and the whole congregation is sitting at home, having the minister or the preacher sitting at home feels right. So it's a different way of doing it. We didn't do that. We actually, through the whole pandemic, we were actually recording the segments of the service in the sanctuary. So I was at the back doing my thing. The minister would come in and I would record the sermon, and then they would go away and whatever scriptures. Before things got really bad, we pre-recorded dozens and dozens of the old standard hymns. So we were able to piece together the whole service. But in hindsight, we probably could have been more effective by actually broadcasting from home, because we're broadcasting to home. It feels right. So again, it's something to think about. If you've got people in the pews, obviously you can't do that. But as I said, make sure that you're addressing the camera from time to time so that people at home actually know. Another thing, I don't think I mentioned this yet. It's not so much right now during the pandemic, because there's not much going on. But before this, when I was live streaming on a regular Sunday, there's a lot of stuff that gets mentioned in the announcements that's, big exciting stuff happening at the church and all the events and all that stuff. For people that are watching from home that are maybe sick or can't come to church or just are not part of the congregation, they're kind of missing out on all that cool stuff that you're talking about and all the exciting stuff that's going on and all of that. So it's worth thinking about whether you want to do some of the announcements before the cameras get turned on, like the local stuff. Not just the fear of missing out for people at home, but if you're sending out to the world and somebody's watching from Nova Scotia, do they really care if it's Fred and Myrtle's anniversary? Do they care if it's so-and-so's birthday? Do they care that there's a property committee meeting on Tuesday night? So some of those local announcements that just tie up space, and this falls into the next point actually, is the expectations for your live stream. The worship team needs to be clear on what you're aiming for. If what you want to do is provide a way for your own people to watch when they can't be in the pews, that's fine. The local announcements are fine, because they are local. But if your intention is evangelism and you want this to go out to a broader audience, you want your service to go viral, if you're that good, then you shape your service that way. So do the announcements, instead of starting your service at 11, do the local announcements at 5 to 11, when everybody's in the pews anyway, and then start the live stream at 11 and do the service that goes out to the world. But that way the people in the pews hear the announcements that are local. Another way to do that a few people have done with some success is to follow the actual live stream service with a Zoom coffee chat, and then things can get discussed amongst the local people that don't necessarily go out to the world. So again, it's just one of those things that, and really this should be done right up front before you even start live streaming. You need to plan on what your expectations actually are, and that's a big part of it is how you shape the service depends on who it's going out to. So there's something to think about. Running just a little bit past, but you guys asked me here, so you got to listen. So I will take some questions afterwards, but the last point, and this is important for all of you, I would think particularly, but none of us are a big mega church with unlimited resources. So we're not going to have some big glossy show like Joel Osteen or one of these big preachers. We don't have 4,000 people in the, we're not preaching from an arena. But if you're aware of what's happening, you try and shape it around what you're doing and your expectations with the content and all of that. If you're authentic in what you put out there, it'll be well received. Make sure that technically it's as good as you can get it, given the equipment that you've got. You know, follow some of the rules with the content. But if what you put out there is your authentic worship, people will respond. It will be worth the effort. So don't be intimidated by the big mega churches and what you see on TV. That's not what we're doing. That's not the United Church. That's why I actually shaped my group around the United Church. Was we are in fact local churches, and that's the way it should be. So bear that in mind. It's not. Don't be intimidated by the thought of having to put on a show. What you're doing is actually broadcasting worship. Right? So that is in a really compacted version. Just a couple of things, a couple of observations from over the years. I can talk for the next 2 hours about the technical stuff if you want, but that's probably not what you want. But if you've got specific questions, I'll field a few until Keith pulls me off the stage.
Just a few questions, and the questions they came up during the course of the presentation, so
okay.
They may not necessarily be in order.
Okay.
But one of the last points you made about announcements,
yeah, and
those online as against those before you,
right,
and almost not saying for those online because it may not be relevant to them.
Right.
What of buy-in? Buy-in. You want to. There are persons who are online far away, but they are being encouraged to participate, to contribute financially and otherwise.
Right.
Wouldn't the announcement be relevant for them as well?
It's a good question. The answer is maybe. There are, if you don't tell people how they can contribute online, they never will. And some may not take advantage of that, but you'd be surprised how many actually will. So having that included as part of your service, I don't actually include it in the service. At the tail end of my service, I have a series of sort of credit slides. One of them is our licensing numbers for the music. One is just the minister's contact information, but that's another one. The online contributions and the link to Canada helps. And we do receive them. So even though that might feel like sort of extraneous information, it is actually helpful to have that on there. And people will respond. You'd be surprised. We have had contributions from outside of our immediate area. So if you don't provide the way for them to do it, they won't.
So just a few more questions, and I'm just asking these and then I'll shut up.
Yeah. Can you do me a favor? Since you're way over there, take the mask off.
Right. I was just about to
my hearing isn't that good.
The presentation suggested stream, YouTube, type as against Zoom.
Yes.
And I suspect that what you're presenting is really a Zoom, a stream, YouTube, and not necessarily Zoom.
Well, Zoom, in my mind, Zoom is a live stream. I include that in live stream because whether you're doing a traditional live stream that's just the live service, or you're bringing in the worship in Zoom, really makes no difference. That's only the tool that you're using to view it, but I still include Zoom as being a live stream. So all of the rules that I was speaking about, I'm including Zoom in that. I suppose I should have been clearer on that. But to me, Zoom is a live stream, so it's a more interactive version, but it is certainly still, all of the same rules really apply. In fact, there are additional ones because Zoom, the sound in Zoom is a challenge. There are certain settings that you need to make in order for the sound to be really clear. And my point about making sure that the audio is as good as you can get it, Zoom is one of the places where you really need to pay attention and make sure that your settings are very clear. So all of what I've said, I'm including Zoom in that.
And I asked that in relation to projection.
Yeah.
And this is video projection.
Yeah.
We do Zoom,
right.
and we take quite a bit of content from YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Now, YouTube, there are some YouTube content that are free. So
Yes.
songs that are free. But I hear you saying that person should be careful of the licensing. Licenses that are associated with some content, but there are a whole other content there that are free.
Okay,
we draw from that.
Yeah, you need to be very careful with that because you're right, kind of, but not entirely. So on YouTube, you can watch Katy Perry, right? And it's available for anybody in the world to watch, but it is not available for you to include in your worship service because you are redistributing something that they get paid for by the number of views in YouTube. They don't get paid by the number of reviews when you include that in your service. So even though it's free for use, it's not free for your use during the service that you're broadcasting separately. Am I saying that in a reasonable fashion? Yeah, so when we talk about licensing, that's a much broader topic than I can hit. But what I will say is be very, very careful in your investigations of what you're using and including. Zoom is less critical, to be perfectly honest. I shouldn't say this when I'm being recorded, but Zoom is less critical because Zoom, usually you send out the invitations, so you know who's watching. So it's less critical that you pay great attention to those rules because it's more of a closed thing. But strictly speaking, and I've fought this a little bit over the years, but because all of the people that are covered by our licensing for music and that's how they get paid. They are professionals. So they need to be compensated for their profession. And if we're using stuff that we shouldn't, the reason that we shouldn't is because they don't get paid for it. So from a purely moral point of view, it's not just an irritation. It's actually a moral responsibility for us to make sure that we are only using what we are licensed to use and that we are not using things that we're making any assumptions. So just be very careful with the licensing. I should probably leave it at that.
So just to sort of piggyback on that same question.
Oh, you're going to get me talking about licensing.
No, well, no, I
Okay.
want to be clear because we have used in the past Zoom as well during the pandemic. And I can understand the whole, showing Katy Perry or something like that and screen sharing so that everybody sees it and that not being quite right. But if we as a congregation have one license and we are allowed to sing the hymns to, in our hymn book because it's covered by our licensing, and then we project those through Zoom.
Yes, okay.
Is that okay?
Where are you talking? No, it's not okay.
It's not okay.
It's very definitely not okay. But it's okay with a very, very small tweak. All of the licensing that we have for printing music and singing it in the church, all of those licenses have a streaming add-on to the license. They're dirt cheap. I think I pay $80 a year for the streaming Without that, no, you are not allowed to put the lyrics up on screen, and you're not allowed to broadcast the singing of that song. So just with the streaming add-on, you're golden. And to be perfectly honest, the rules around licensing of music and such in Canada are much less stringent than they are in the States. The US is much more litigious than we are, so that's logical. But as soon as you put something out on the internet, it can be watched from anywhere. So we generally default to the more stringent rules, which is the American rules. Even though the Canadian rules are somewhat less onerous, it's best. And like CCLI and One License are both American companies. So if you read through their requirement, like, you need this for this and this and this, that's what you need actually to use them in the States. But because we're putting stuff out on the internet, it could be viewed in anywhere else. So we usually just use their rules, even though strictly speaking, our rules are somewhat less stringent.
So get the streaming option.
And there is a certain amount of stuff that's covered by United Church in sort of general terms. But this, I'm not a lawyer, and so the whole licensing thing it's a really big topic. Yeah. Just whoever is taking care of your licensing, just make sure that they do the streaming add-on, and that they actually check that all their songs are covered. Because when you hear One License, you might think it's everything. It's not. So it needs to be checked each and every time.
If perhaps somebody had been, say, streaming music for the last year and a half with projected of hymn lyrics, posting them on to a private Facebook page after they have been recorded. So recorded a Zoom call and then posted that onto a private worship Facebook page in Hamilton, say.
This may be the high point of my day.
Should we be like taking that down?
I would say, strictly speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised actually that you didn't get flagged for copyright infringement from Facebook, because both Facebook and YouTube, their algorithms actually scan as you're uploading, and they will notify
It's certainly
you.
not a great recording. Like, maybe that's why. Maybe
And
their
that-
audio is so horrible.
That may in fact be the case, but strictly speaking, those shouldn't be on there.
Per se.
I know you wouldn't do that, but this
No,
hypothetical
right,
church in
per se.
Hamilton
Yeah.
shouldn't do that.
Got it. I'll talk them.
I think that might actually be a great closing note, wouldn't it?
Okay, so if you have the Voices United hymn book,
Yep.
but as soon as you put it up on the screen, what do you have to have?
The stream.
You have to have the whatever the licensing agreement for that song. And what the agreement tells you what the licensing agency is. That's one of the notes. Just make sure that you have the streaming add-on for that.
But then if, okay, so you have to have the add-on on top of that.
Or you'll be like that one church that
I know, yeah.
John, if we had questions about audio in our church, just
Yep.
microphones and stuff, is that something we could hire you to come and give us some expertise for?
Yes, I'm not a sound guy, strictly speaking. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing. But yeah, that's easily done.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I expect to see a whole bunch of people applying for membership to Canadian churches to live stream. So anyway, was there anything else before we wrap it up? No? Okay. Thank you for not throwing your off.
We tossed our candies to you.
John, I just want to thank you for helping us to learn. I've discovered all the mistakes I've made in there. I'll go back and fix them.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you.
This concludes a portion, our final portion of our workshop today. As Debbie mentioned, there is a feedback sheet that we'd like to collect from you at the end. We're going to turn it over to Lennox now to close down the workshop.
Well, thank you, Keith, and thank you all for coming. You have been a wonderful group, and if I were you, I would just kind of just pat myself on the back, or do a little more than that, and just give ourselves a and thanks for leading us as well. This has been a good day, and it would not have been possible had you not raised some of these issues in the interviews that you've had. We had some interviews with you, and you asked some questions, you asked us to do something more, and we did something more by bringing us together and have some speakers to address some of these matters. As we close, we want to ensure that this is not just information and knowledge for now, but that they are going to be applied in our respective spaces. Applied in ways that will enhance, empower, and make sure that people are drawn closer to their God. Let us pray. I invite us to stand. If you can just hold the hand of the person beside you. I don't know if that is allowed in this kind of space, but we are not allowed.
Can't take your mask off.
Lord, you're good, and your mercies endure it forever. Today, God, we have experienced the wonders of working together, the beauty of sharing ideas, and the input that comes, oh God, with our being together in a space, learning new ways ministry can be done. As we leave from this place, Lord, we leave with new inspiration, revived, retooled, ready to reach out for ministry. Ministry, oh God, that we didn't come ourselves, but we responded to a call by you. We ask your blessing on our journey. We ask your strengthening of our faith. We ask, oh God, for the witness that we'll share in ways that only you can allow us to share with others. That those who we share this with, oh God, will draw them closer to you. As we leave, Lord, we leave with the assurance that we go not alone, but you go with us. Bless us now and bless us always, because we ask this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Bless you all. Bless you all. Take care. God bless you.